Okay, up next, I want to go through some of these new MIDI tools that are here. There's a whole bunch of new things that are going to give you, that are designed to help you create. New ways of generating MIDI notes that'll both help you get around if you're not so savvy at music theory, and also just if you're looking for a new idea. Say like generate a new idea and see what you think of it. They're really fun. Some of these tools we've seen before if you've ever used like notation programs like Sibelius or something like that. Some of these types of things have been around in those for a little while. Things where you can say like, here's a melody, shuffle the notes, and come up with something new, kind of a randomized type of a thing. So they're not all entirely new to like the world. Some of them have sort of existed, but I've never really seen any in a DAW before, and they're super fun and super handy. So in order to get these things, we're gonna look at some of these new windows in our clip view here. Okay, we have launch controls. This will be all pretty familiar. I don't think there's anything wildly new here. Our follow actions and stuff like that. But here we have some pitch and time controls. Here we have transformations. And here we have generate. Okay, so we're going to look at all three of these in this section now. So let's dive in. Let's look at stretch and transpose first. Okay, so let's start with a fresh MIDI clip here. Now for stretch and transpose, these are all pretty easy. So I'm just gonna make like a nice little F major chord here. Sounds like this. Pretty. So I'm gonna go to this pitch and time window and open that up. Now there's a few things we can do here. We can fit it to scale if it's already not. Now my scale, you can see right here, is C major, and that's getting it from the global scale up here. So I can fit it to scale if it's already in there. I can invert it if it's not. I can highlight some notes, and then I can actually just click and drag on this box to transpose it if I want. That's kind of neat. This inversion tool, I'm not really sure what this is doing. It's not doing anything at the moment. Typically what an inversion tool would do would be to take like the lowest note and put it at the top like that. So I'm not really sure about that at the moment. Maybe that's still on its way. But if we want to do a little bit more mathematical transposition, okay, so if I select this chord and then I just start dragging this up, you can see what it's adding, right? It's adding a whole nother version of the chord on top of it. Okay, and then if I click out of it, we have it. Okay, I'm gonna undo that. Cool, so we have new ways of adding more notes to it. And you know, these are all gonna fit within the scale if we want it to. And so they're probably all gonna sound pretty good. Now for stretching, we've got a couple new tools here. This just simply, we can just dial this up or down and make our notes really long. We can also X2, X half, whatever we want. There's also this new feature, which we'll see in a second, but if I click and drag on the darker bar up here, this actually might not be new. I just never noticed it before. But what I can do is now I've got these 2 points that kind of look like loop points, but they're not. And I can click and drag on them and put them where I want them to go. And it's going to extend everything in that bracket. Okay, so some handy tools for just transposing and adjusting the timing of our MIDI notes. All right, up next is humanize. Now this is almost funny because in the old days, we had Humanize. Humanize was a button that I don't know if it was in Ableton, but a long time ago, I used to use Digital Performer as my main DAW. This is like forever ago. And Digital Performer is a good program. And it had Humanize in it as a function. I don't know if it left. If there was a while where everything had Humanize in it, I feel like. And then it went away, went kind of out of fashion. And now it's back, which is great because I missed it. Here's what Humanize does. Let's take something like this and let's make this like just totally on the grid. Okay. So now this is exactly on the grid. I'm going to select all of this. Now here's Humanize, and I can give it a percentage. Let's like move it around a little bit. See, you see what's happening here? Everything's sliding off the grid just a little bit as I move this Humanize button around. Now why is that? So let's put it at 12%. Oh, and I turned it off. Humanize. There we go. So now if I zoom way in, you can see like this E is early. This F is late. Things are not exactly on the grid. They are, you might say, how a human would actually play it. Humans are not robots. When we play stuff, we're not perfectly on the grid, and that's what makes things sound natural and cool. So this is very subtle, but it'll go a long way in certain situations. If you have like a piano line that you want to sound very realistic, then put a little bit of this Humanize on it. Not too much, just a little bit. That'll make it feel much more natural. Drums. Oh man, drums for sure. If you have a drum pattern that you sequenced in the MIDI grid and you want to give it that natural feel, if it's feeling too robotic to you, select all the notes, dial in a little bit of Humanize, and it'll give it a much more natural feel, almost like you played it in on pads. So it's kind of funny, right? Like we call it Humanize, and what we do is we basically make it sloppy. But you only have to make it a little bit sloppy to make it sound like a human played it. So very powerful tool. Use it on a lot of stuff, just a touch, and it'll sound much more natural. All right, let's get to arpeggiate. Now I'm going to close this little pitch and time window here and open transform. Now we've got a whole bunch of options here. I'm going to go through most of them right now. Let's start with arpeggiate. Now you might be thinking, hey, we already have an arpeggiate thing. We have a MIDI effect called arpeggiate. What happened to that? It's still here. You still have it, and it still works the same, except it's got actually a couple new bells and whistles. But this is a little different. The main difference between the arpeggiate MIDI effect and this arpeggiate is that the arpeggiate MIDI effect, you can put it on something and it's going to arpeggiate it, which maybe I should define. What arpeggiate means is if you give it a chord, it's going to play it one note at a time. Okay? So if I give it this, it's going to play this. Okay, that's arpeggiating it, playing one note at a time. With the MIDI effect, that's going to just happen. But with this, we're going to be able to write it into the MIDI clip so we can see what's happening and have a little more control over what's happening. Okay, so let's take a look at it. So first of all, the style. Now this is actually the same as our MIDI effect. So we can say go up, go up then down, go down then up, go up, blah, blah, blah. And then some weirder ones, con and diverge, pinky up, pinky down, thumb up, thumb down, play order, random, random, other, random once. So play around with these. There's some fun stuff here. You can find some fun patterns. Let's set it to up and down. Okay, I don't know why it repeated, well. Okay, so what it's doing here is it's gonna go up and then down and it's gonna repeat the top note. So the way this is going to work is it's going to arpeggiate for the duration of the notes that you gave it. Okay, so I'm going to undo this. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to take these notes. I'm going to do this trick again. And I'm going to stretch these out to be, I don't know, a full bar long. Okay. Now, I'm going to arpeggiate. So let me talk about these transform controls here a little bit. They're a little different than you might expect. So when this is yellow, when it says transform, that means it's kind of doing it. And if I change anything, it's going to apply right away. But if I want it to, so anything I change, like if I adjust any of these dials, it's going to snap into all of these settings right now. If I just want it to do the settings that are on the screen again, the best way to do it is with this little button here. Okay. So now it's doing it. All right. So I'm going to undo that because I want to walk you through some of these settings. Okay. Let's do these two first because they're the easiest. Rate, what is each individual note going to be? A 16th note is what I have it set to here. I can make it longer or shorter, right? Cool. Not a 12th note. Let's go back to 16th notes. And then gate is going to be the length of the note, basically. 100% is going to fill the whole duration of the 16th note. I can make it shorter if I just want short notes, or I can make them longer if I want longer notes. Okay, but I'm going to set that right to 100%. Okay, now steps and distance. This actually, I had to like really work on this for like a while to really understand what's going on with steps and distance, because there's no manual yet. So here's what it is. Steps. This is, both these two buttons are going to add notes to the chord, okay? They're going to transpose and add things, okay? So if I take steps down to 0, we're going to add no notes, okay? It's just going to be the notes that I put in, F, A, and C, okay? It's F, A, C, F, A, C, all the way up and down, okay? So the number shown here is how many notes are not in the chord. How many notes do I want to add to it? Do I want Ableton to add? So I have 0 right now. Let's say 1. Okay, I have 1 note. So now there's going to be 1 note somewhere that's not in the chord that it added. And it's going to be this E it added up at the top. Neat. So how is it deciding what note that is? It's with this distance thing. So this is determining the interval of the chord tones, or of the notes that it's going to add. Now again, it's going to stay in the key if I ask it to, which I have done by turning this on. So now I can add all kinds of extra notes. I can say make 10 extra notes, crank this up. Let's take this up to something so we can see all of them. See, now it's adding all kinds of extra notes. And this actually makes kind of a cool effect. Right? Let's change our pattern. Let's make maybe less. Okay, so we went from that just an F major chord, just 3 notes, to this crazy thing. Okay, we can tame it a little bit more. All right, and we get back down to 0 notes. Okay, let's go random. Oh, and with this distance, you can go negative, and it'll add lower notes. Cool? So it's all over the place. So that is what our new supercharged transform arpeggiate option does. Cool? All right, so let's look at another one. Let's look at connect. Okay, let's talk about connect. This is actually a really fun one. And if you've watched any of my music theory content, then this might be familiar to you, because I talk about doing this kind of thing all the time, where we might make a chord progression and we want it to sound more natural and symphonic. In order to do that, we're going to like connect the dots a little bit, right? That's exactly what this is doing. So let me give you a simple tutorial here, and then I'll try that. So transform, select connect, and then we've got some options here. So I have this little, almost just a scale here. Sounds like this. A little creepy little scale and sort of F, not really. So connect right now isn't going to do anything because it doesn't have room. What it's going to do is it's going to try to add a note between the notes that I select. So I'm going to select all the notes, and then I'm going to make them a little shorter. Okay, now I've got a space in between each note. So now I can say add a note, put a note in between each note. And now I've got some controls to tell us where those go. So density, I'm going to say 100% because I want all of the gaps to be filled. Spread, I can kind of say how far away that note should be, that extra note that it's adding. Rate, what kind of note is it? I could make a shorter note, a longer note. I have 16th notes here, so if I add a 16th note, it's just going to automatically do it. And then I'm not exactly sure what tile does yet. I think if I make a short note, we'll be able to see it. Okay, so it's stacking the notes in different ways. But if I have this set to a 16th note, it has nothing to do. So here's what I made now. Okay, let me play with the spread a little bit. And the rate. A little swing in there. Super weird stuff. Okay, so it's pretty cool. Let's go and try my little string thing. We'll see if it works. Okay, let's give this a try. So what I've done in the magic of editing there is I made a fairly simple little chord progression. 1, 6, 2, 5 in minor, if that means anything to you. If it doesn't matter. And then I loaded up kind of my favorite little string library at the moment, which is the Cinestrings Solo. So this is not a big orchestra sound. This is a small chamber orchestra sound, but it's really quite nice. Here's what it sounds like. Okay, cool. Now let's try connect. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's take the top two voices, I guess. Just the top couple of notes, and let's make some room. So let's go like that. Okay. Now let's say connect. Oh, interesting. Let's go down to just a half note. Now that's interesting. It's adding a few notes, but let's see what it did. It's not bad, actually. Let's give it a little more variation ability here. not bad. It gives me something I can work with and I can play around with. Let's try taking all of these and making them smaller and just tell it, add another chord in between. Let's see what happens. All right. That was pretty impressive. Cool. So it just made a whole new chord progression for us. That's wild. Let's change the spread a bit. Let's see what happens now. I rather like that. It's not perfect, you know, it needs some work, but okay, let's try one more thing just to push the extremes of this. Okay, so here's my original one. I'm going to select A. I'm going to go down to just a quarter note. Set this to a quarter note. Tell it to fill that up. Oh, I want a whole bunch of quarter notes. There we go. So this is what tile does, I suppose. Okay, so now I've got a whole bunch. I think I want the spread to be smaller so we stay within an octave. Okay. That's okay. All right, so now I gave it 1 chord per bar, and it's going to make 3 more chords per bar for this whole thing. So let's hear it now. Pretty cool. Let's take all these super low notes that it made and just move them up an octave. Interesting. I feel conflicted about this because this is so cool that it's people are gonna do this instead of learning how to do music theory, but probably not. It's cool. You should do it. So yeah, that's wild. That's the connect feature. Okay, the next one is a little more simple. This is ornament. So if I select ornament down here, it gives me basically 2 big choices, a flam and a grace note. The main reason to use those 2 things, flam is going to be more conducive to doing with percussion stuff, primarily drums. And a grace note is kind of the similar thing, but with pitches. So a flam is like on a drum set, like let's say on a snare drum, if you can hit the drum with a stick, that sounds cool. But if you hit it with 2 sticks at the same time, and one is just a little bit in front of the other one, it goes like that, but that was exaggerated. In real life, it would be like that. That's a bit of a flam. A grace note is like an ornament, which is what these are called, which is what this transform effect is called. So a grace note is when you've got a melodic thing, but you add a quick little note before the note that you're going to play. So here it's saying, do you want the pitch to be higher, the same, or lower? And then you can say the number of pitches, the velocity, the position, and the chance that it plays. So let's take, I'm going to go back to this little melody. Let's speed it back up a little bit. Okay, let's take this D and let's add an ornament. Let's add a grace note that's higher. Okay, you can see it's got a little doo-doo-doo before it. That's what we just added. The doo-doo-doo. Technical term for doo-doo-doo is a grace note. There it is. Okay, yeah, it's cool. It's a grace note. If you want to get really into the nitty-gritty on grace notes, this is a type of ornament. There's names for all of this stuff. I think this one, is this a mordant? No, it's close to a mordant. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's just call it a grace note. Okay, let's talk about quantize. So maybe you already know what quantize is. That is when we have notes that are not perfectly on the grid. And in the past, we could use Command U to quantize, and we can still do that. But if we want a little more control in our clip, we can go to Transform and Quantize. So our options here are the current grid, which is going to be, you know, what I'm looking at here. Or we can say quarter notes, eighth notes, 32nd notes, 16th notes. So we can adjust things that way. We can add triplets, which can be really handy if you're programming like really delicate stuff, really complicated stuff, like maybe some of those like trap beat hi-hats or something like that. Flipping over to triplets really quickly is really handy. So this is a good way to do it. So now you see we've got 8th note triplet, 16th note triplet. They're a little different. Now I am, at the moment, adjusting the end notes, ends of the notes. So I can do start, end, or both. So if I do start notes and end notes, it's going to look like that. They're going to stay really uniform triplets. And then we can say the amount, so we can, you know, have a little flexibility. This is, in a way, quantizing is like the opposite of humanizing, right? Like it's undoing humanizing, basically. It's going to make you more on the grid, where humanizing is going to take you more off the grid. Okay, so you can think of humanize and quantize as kind of two sides of the same coin. They're opposites in a way. But more or less it works the way that quantize works in the past. Just gives us a new kind of interface and some kind of easy control to see how it's going to work. Cool. Let's move on. Okay, let's go to Recombine. Now this one is really interesting because this is a really powerful tool, and it took me a minute to figure out why we're calling it Recombine. So just kind of hold on to that for a second. I have a theory, but we'll get to it in a minute. Let me show you what it does first. So first we can choose which parameter we're going to affect, pitch, length, or velocity. Let's just look at pitch for the moment. Now imagine this little melodic thing is on like a scroll kind of, and we can kind of scrub through its alignment with this rotate feature. So you see this F is the first note. If I go over by 1, now that F is the second note. Okay, if I go over by 2, so the F keeps moving over, and what was the last note becomes the first note. Okay, so I can really kind of scrub through the orientation of this, the first and last note. Okay, so that's cool. Now if I do it with length, it's going to keep the pitches in the same spot, but change the length. Now, right now, that's going to do nothing because all the lengths of my pitches are the same. So let's take this last one, oops, and make it a long note, okay? Now let's take length. And now you can see that long note kind of scrubbing through there. So that can kind of show you what length is doing in a weird way. So now it's the D. If I go back one more, it's going to be the F. So it's applying the rhythm, the length of the note, to a different note. And the same thing with velocity. All my velocities are the same right now. Let's randomize them. And now if I scrub the velocity, they're all changing. And the note length still. And we can say the pitch. Let's do all at once. Right? So now everything's just kind of shuffling around. Now if I want to, I can also just hit shuffle and just have it shuffle the notes and rhythms around and velocities. Or I can say mirror. So what's up, go down, what's down, go up, what's long, go short, whatever. Mirror image of everything. Okay, now here's what I got. Something totally different. Cool, so this is really cool. Okay, so why do we call it recombined? What I think the logic here is that we're going to take notes and rhythms, separate them, shuffle them around, and then put them back together, kind of, and recombine them. I think that's why they're calling it that. I may have called it like rotate or shuffle, actually, would have been a good name for the whole thing. It's a feature here, but it's also like what everything is doing. So that's recombine. Another great tool to help you just generate new ideas. Okay, up next is span. Now this one really has to do with the articulations of the note, and it gives us three options here. So legato means connect notes together, let one note drift right into the next note. Tenuto means let each individual note play for its full length. And staccato means cut things short. So it's got a nice little graphic here showing you the actual musical symbol, which I love. So let's go back to our orchestral sound to hear the difference between these. Okay, so you can see when I kind of crank this up, what's happening. Like the ends of the notes are drifting a little bit longer to connect. I wouldn't really want to do it that much, but I might want them to overlap just a hair. Variation is going to get you just a little bit extra, little wiggle room here. If I go tenuto, it's going to let me just kind of control the ends of the notes up to the next note. And staccato, obviously, is going to make everything short. And I can make it shorter or longer. And a little bit of wiggle room for variation. Okay, so three quick articulations, we would call that in the more performance world. Handy for really crafting your MIDI notes. All right, up next, strum. Now this is a handy little tool. It does one thing and it's super obvious what it does. If I just do it, you'll get it. So if I load up strum, we see this. Watch this. Roop, roop, roop. That's what it does. It's you know, strumming, like strumming a guitar. So here I've made a chord using our synth, but this is how a guitar would voice like an E major chord. Okay, so it doesn't sound like a guitar, but these are the notes of a guitar when a guitar plays an E major chord. So let's strum it. Let's put a little bit of flange on that there. Put a little bit of angle to that. Right? It's kind of whoop, rips right up like a guitar would do. Okay, let's look at it on our orchestra thing here. You know, you can really see what it's doing when I do that. But let's just do it a little bit. Now, this isn't going to sound very good. And this is something you have to consider when you're doing the strum. Because these notes with this kind of orchestra sound that we have here, these notes take a second to speak. So we're probably not really going to hear it all that much in this case. Let's find out. Yeah, let's do it a little bit more. You kind of hear it. Let's go back over to this one and do it as extreme as possible. Yeah, that's cool. Neat. You know, I've spent a lot of time just like nudging things around little by little to get it to make this sound, and this just gives us a nice, really easy effect to do it. So it's going to save you a lot of time if you like this kind of effect. Okay, two more. Time warp. So this one is kind of wild. This is kind of a head scratcher. But the intent of this one is, you see how I have here all notes are equal length. This is going to give us some flexibility to change that kind of wildly. So with this little grid here, think about this is the beginning of this clip and this is the end of this clip, okay? So, and then higher is faster. So if I move this up, that means the durations of notes on this side are going to be faster than on this side, okay? If I move this down, they're going to be faster over here and slower over there. But I can also add a third point. Now they're going to be faster in the middle, or slower in the middle, okay? So it's like really kind of wacky. Now, you might think, well, isn't this just throwing everything way off the grid? It is, but I could also just turn on quantize, and then now everything is kind of snaps to a grid, so it's still there. So let's take a listen to this now that, so I've made it basically start at the same speed and get faster rhythmically, not tempo. The rhythms are shorter. So it's different than just speeding up the tempo. Let's see what happens. So back down, and then we're back to where we started, sort of. Okay, weird. So this really lets you treat time like a rubber band with your MIDI notes. It's kind of wild. Okay, the last one in this whole big section of transformations kind of is under its own little heading because it's actually a Max for Live device. But it all works the same. You don't need to worry about the Max for Live stuff at all. It's just here. So this is a velocity shaper. So let me open our velocity a little bit more so we can see what's happening here. And it's pretty obvious, right? You can see this this arc and what the velocity is doing, right? We can move it around and just kind of see what it's doing. So, you know, we can really kind of craft our velocity to do what we want here. We can make more points on this line by just clicking on it. You know, it's a velocity shaper. It is exactly what it sounds like. But it's giving us a lot more control over our velocity than we've ever had, which is quite enjoyable. I like it. You can set a loop here so that it's going to go through this a few times, in this case 6 times. So it's kind of hard to see what it's doing. But if I send it down to 2, maybe we can tell. And let's go like this. Okay, so we can see the arch, it's going down, so there, and then it starts over again here. So it's going through this pattern twice in this case. So, pretty cool way to really sculpt your velocities. A handy tool. All right, let's move on and talk about some of the MIDI generators in Live 12.